stories which provide a heartfelt connection between hero, heroine, and the reader, believing the emotional journey on the path to true love is the most important bond. Anabelle knows sometimes life doesn't provide a happily ever after, but her novels always do. She enjoys talking to readers. Visit AnabelleBryant.com. I'll type in the URL in the chat feature for the latest news concerning upcoming novels and see what she's up to on Facebook and Twitter.
Hi, everyone. So I heard, Marie, I heard you talking about technology and the frustrations with that. I am a kindergarten teacher by day, and I have been thrust into online teaching and having to learn all of these Zoom things and Google Classroom and all of that. So I'm not really a techie person. It is very frustrating to me as well. So here's my first question for you. Why is everybody muted? Because does that mean we can't have a back and forth?
Oh, I just muted them so that you can do your part. And then when you're ready for Q&A, we will unmute them. Or do you just want me to unmute everyone?
Well,
It's up to you.
Do you find that the noise becomes a problem? Because I would rather not just talk at everybody for an hour. I would rather if we could have a conversation.
Okay. Everyone has been unmuted. And if anyone has like doggies and stuff, please mute yourself. Okay.
If anybody wants to mute me, just don't tell me you muted me. But I would so much rather have it be like a conversation with all of us and you interject or you ask a question instead of me just kind of talking at all of you. Keep in mind, I teach kindergarten, so no question is silly and you can interrupt me as much as you want because I'm used to being interrupted every 5 seconds. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Michael. I can't see Michael. Are we always cloaked in darkness when it comes to Michael?
Yeah, he's just having problems with his computer. Yeah,
no worries. Okay, and thank you to Michael and thank you to all of you for having me. I'm so happy to see people and smiling people and writing people. This was exactly what I needed today, so I hope that I can be a benefit to all of you, and you are definitely brightening my day, so I'm so happy to be here. I made notes. I hope you don't mind, but it keeps me accountable. I'm a chatty person, and I'll just start talking and I'll start rolling through, and then I'll look at the clock and the time will be up and I didn't share half of what I wanted to. So I'm just trying to keep myself accountable. If you see me glancing down, it's just so I can make sure I'm putting in everything that I want to. I don't know about all of you. If your mind is able to be creative during this health crisis and this time that we're going through all together, but for me, it has been very difficult to write. How about you guys? Have you been writing?
Yeah, no,
I've been writing. Yeah.
I have not been writing.
I had trouble writing. I also work full-time from home.
So it's challenging. I mean, we're balancing our home life. We're getting an influx of news. You know, I've kind of pulled back from watching so much because it was too much for me. As I mentioned, I'm a teacher, so now I'm answering I'm helping a lot of parents understand this online teaching stuff. And at the same time, I'm trying to order things online that I never thought I would have to order because I'm not getting out of the house as much. So it is a real struggle to get the words on the page. But what keeps me strong is that I'm hoping that the stories that I have written and that are out there are providing an escape, because reading is an escape that I can still enjoy, even though my writing game isn't so strong right now. My reading game is doing great. And I see a lot of bookcases in the background of everybody's little pictures. So I hope that you're finding the same kind of escape. Does anybody read Regencies?
I do. I do.
I have.
Okay.
I love them.
I definitely feel like it's kind of an acquired taste. I mean, if someone gave me a science fiction novel, I probably wouldn't be too interested in stepping out of the box to read it unless it really was like the book you had to read. But I'm hoping that whatever I shared today could kind of have some carryover value so that it's not so specific to Regency that maybe you can apply it to whatever genre you enjoy reading and writing.
Well, I used to edit them. This is Alice. You're not going to get my picture because I just realized what I look like on television. I may or may not be in person next month. Can I put up a picture of somebody else? Anyway, I used to edit Regencies, and then I represented Regency authors, especially Joe Beverly. But what I didn't realize was that I'd read a lot of Regencies because I'd read a lot of 19th century, and I'd read Jane Austen and everybody else, and many of the elements were there from that.
Right. I mean, the framework, and this is totally off script. So this is what I'm talking about having my notes, because now I'm going to start commenting on something that's not in my notes. But when you think of romance writing, the framework is there no matter what genre it is. It's just a matter of building the meat on the bones, on the skeleton of the story to make it fit your niche of whatever interests you. So I'm hoping there's at least some carryover value to what I can share with you. I did want to mention briefly that my path to publication was very long and winding. So I'm not familiar with where everybody is in the stage of their writing, but I just can't stress enough that you just have to stay determined, and you never have to count yourself out. And no matter which way life takes you, everybody's path is different. We might be all going to the same place, but everybody's path is different. I was an on-again, off-again writer. I always loved to write. I kept journals from a young age. I was on the school newspaper and all of that stuff. I considered journalism as my major. Then I went to teaching, which was a true calling, and I'm happy for that decision. But I was always writing. But oddly enough, my desire to get published didn't come from my love of writing. It came from my love of reading. And the more I read romance novels, the more frustrated I was becoming, because I was not happy with the way that the heroine was being portrayed in so many romance novels that I read. Now I'm talking 20 years ago, that I read when I was reading, and I had time for reading before the rest of life hit. The heroine was always weak and vulnerable. She depended on the hero to solve all her problems and to come in and make her life perfect. And it really bothered me. I went to Rutgers College. I have to say that I have a pretty open mind to things. And it bothered me that the woman, the heroine in all of these romances, seemed to be like a quarter of the story, where the man's desires, his goals, his journey seemed to be so much more important. And she would set all of her desires aside to just make sure she had the love in the end. And the more I read books like this, the more I became frustrated. And so finally I said, I can write a better book. I can write a story where the woman is just as important as the man, and that she doesn't forgive him for every transgression he ever had just because he's going to love her, which I just felt wasn't a good trade-off. So that's how I really found my way to writing. It was from my love of reading instead of my love of writing, which is just, I don't know, was my path. And it was an on-again, off-again path. I paused for higher education. I got my master's. I traveled extensively. I got married. I started a family. I pursued my PhD. And even though I was writing stories, I was kind of just shoving them aside, and I wasn't doing much with them. So that when we jump all the way to 2014, when I finally did get published, I had queried for several years, but it was always on again, off again. And what I was naive about is that all those years, the industry was changing dramatically over and over and over again. But I was still caught up in the, oh, you send your manuscript and somebody reads it and then they publish your book. And that was a lot of tough love and a big education for me. So I just wanted to share a little bit with you. It took me like 30 years to get where I'm happy being right now, but it wasn't 30 years of persistence. It was kind of on again, off again, stepping onto the path and then stepping off again. So anyway, 2014, Harlequin offered me a digital first contract, which really turned out to be digital only. At the time, I was very upset. My dream was always to have my books on a shelf in a bookstore. But in retrospect, I am very happy that things turned out the way they did, because when you go digital, you can put your books out more quickly than a traditional publisher. And because I had written all those books that I kept putting aside, when it finally came to publish, I had lots of books, so that every 2 or 3 months, another book came out. And that also helped me kind of develop my brand a little bit because a new book kept coming out. Then in 2018, I did sign with Kensington, which was the dream all along, to have a book on a bookshelf. My babies were born. Here's my Midnight Secrets, guys. And that's something pivotal happens at midnight to change the romance. And so kind of that's where I am now. The fourth book comes out in October. And then in 2021, I have a new series starting with a very assertive role for the woman. Still true to the time. It's important for me to stay true to Regency, but really true to the time. Which brings us to Regency. So I'm going to take a pause because I was like talking. Does anybody want to add something, ask a question or anything before I keep going?
I have a
20 years.
Yeah, or more.
Wow.
Probably more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say that you've made the woman as important as the man, but you showed your covers and all the covers just had a guy on it.
Well, there's something called marketing. And I have pet peeves, like just like all of you, I'm sure. I don't like a decapitated woman on the cover. A lot of covers have the woman glancing backwards over her shoulder, or they cut her off right at the neck. Readers like that because they don't want to be told what a person looks like in a story. This is, marketing research. But when I go in a bookstore, I'm very much a visual person, and I am drawn to a cover that attracts me. So when I was asked what kind of covers do I want, as a female reader, I knew I wanted a guy on the cover. Now within the story, my heroine, she often is the one that fixes the problems, and she's equally as intelligent. But before anybody could read my story about my smart heroine, they have to pick up my book in the store and want to read it and look at it. Okay. So from a marketing standpoint, I wanted a hot guy.
Okay. I asked that because I was told that it was important to have both the male and the female on the cover. And I don't believe that. And obviously you don't either. So it was good to hear.
I don't either.
I'm sorry.
No.
Kensington has been really good to me. They've asked me what I want on the cover, and that was definitely, I felt strongly about. But Candace, since that time, since those were contracted in 2018, and the last one will be coming out this coming October, having a guy on the cover now is a no-no. So from a marketing standpoint, no more guys on the cover for me. and since my next series is very female strong, it will definitely have a woman on the cover.
Okay.
So I guess, things change, just like, the man and woman in that passionate embrace. People don't want to see that anymore. Those were the books that I read, way back, starting with my favorite authors. That's what was always on the cover. And I remember getting aggravated when it would just be like a flower on the cover. Like,
I hated those. I hated the candy boxes. Ugh.
Yeah. Gloves. I don't want the gloves. I want to see people. But again, I'm a visual person. So that definitely, the color scheme and the picture definitely pulls me in. Okay, so we said we have some Regency readers.
Yeah.
I thought it might be fun if I compiled a list of like the 10 best things and most compelling things about Regency. But again, like I said, definitely there's carryover and there's nuances. So if you write contemporary or whatever your genre happens to be, they'll have some carryover for you. But I thought these were like the top 10 swoon-worthy Regency things for me. Does anybody want to throw out any ideas of what might be on the list?
Clothes, history,
fashion, yes.
places,
titles.
I'm sorry, Maria?
Titles.
Yes.
I needed
aristocracy.
An Earl, yes.
Regency language.
The language, absolutely. Whether it's the proper language or the slang. I think the slang is so compelling. I really love writing about the aristocracy, but it's an odd thing. I don't want to stick everybody in a ballroom or a tea room. I want them in other places. And my Bastards of London series doesn't take place at all in any of the ballrooms. It's about the guys that were in Seven Dials and the slums and the dirtier places of London. So it's a little bit edgier. They own a gaming hall. But anyway, so yes, settings. Somebody said settings, and absolutely. Dreaming of dancing with a dude, or being in a ballroom with the candles overhead in the chandeliers, taking high tea, or drawing rooms where you're receiving visitors and the protocol that goes around that. Of course, the bedchambers. It's a romance novel, so we're going to have all the furniture and the lush setting of setting that up. So I feel like setting is one of the reasons readers love Regency, because when you read, it's an escape. And many people want to escape to another time. We live contemporary times. So as much as I enjoy reading some contemporaries, if you want to escape and be transported to another time altogether, I think Regency definitely checks that box. Another important part for me is the slow burn. Most Regency writing, if it stays true to Regency, it's the slow burn. It's the glimpse of an ankle or his fingers trailed across her palm. It definitely isn't backing her up into the elevator, in chapter 2. That's not going to happen. My books are organic. It always is very natural, and it's definitely the push and pull of the attraction. And that's something that I adore about Regency, that you're not meeting someone, kissing someone, and falling into bed immediately. I know authors have blurred the line there. They're, the market is what the market is, and readers sometimes want different things. But I prefer to stay and preserve Regency and to keep that slow burn. Some people get frustrated by it, though.
That's why I like Emma, that the latest Emma came out like this past spring or so. Emma, the latest Emma adaptation of the Jane Austen book. So I've been like binge watching the old movies.
And it is like, for me, that attraction, that one glance across the room that says so much, that to me is just as important to at the end when the relationship is established and they're devoted to each other, and then they consummate that physical relationship. So that's something that I feel strongly about in Regency as well. But again, it's a personal taste like anything else. And there are authors who have, dabbled with that a little bit. So let's talk about heroines. I mentioned before that was like a real motivation for me to get writing. And just because heroines have so many strict rules and customs during the Regency doesn't mean that they weren't intelligent or clever or intuitive or determined. And I feel like that was definitely something that was ignored in the past, but can be built upon today. I still stay true to the times, so I try to follow customs as much as possible. The one thing I am guilty of is my heroine usually finds a way to ditch her maid. Because if you have a lady's maid with you all the time, then you're probably not going to be able to do some of the things that are required to do in a romance. So in order to establish that attraction, I'm pretty good at having my heroine give her maid the slip. If somebody's sitting in the room the whole time, it could make things a little more difficult if you're trying to write a romance. In the beginning, maybe not later on. And my heroes, I tend to make vulnerable. I think heroes shouldn't be perfect. I don't think any of us are perfect. Of course, I can only speak for myself, but we all have flaws. Sometimes if you're a very clever writer, you can make a flaw that's really a strength. A man who's too empathetic or too charitable, or too generous with his time, that could be a flaw, but, oh, I see a dog. Oh, I love dogs.
Stay in the other room. She keeps scratching. I came into this closet.
Oh, gosh.
Doggy.
I'm glad you brought her in.
This is my kid stuff from college that we had to move home quick.
But if anything, if the heroine isn't stronger, then at least she's on even footing with the hero. So I think heroes are definitely a reason that Regency is so strong. We do have a preconceived notion from Mr. Darcy and all of those heroes in our past, the Fabio images, all those heroes that make us love period pieces. But even the clothing, and I know Barbara mentioned clothing and fashion, like for a man, it's just as important for a woman. And just like we might regard a contemporary guy in a tuxedo and how handsome he might look, the whole Regency and the period clothing of that time, the fashion, the culture, the art, all those things that put us right into the story. And if nuanced well, can teach us things as well. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I want you to talk.
Yeah, I saw BBC had some YouTube videos of how the costume designers actually designed the clothing for the 2009 Emma and for the one that came out this year. And it was just amazing to see. And they actually interviewed the actors and actresses about the clothing. Yeah, look it up. If you look up clothing, Emma 2009 BBC, you'll see interviews with the actors and actresses and the costume designer actually talking about the color palettes and how the clothing was put together for the particular character in light of their development and their personality in the book and the adaptation.
And how well done, right? For
Yes.
clothes to reflect the personality. And
Yes.
not just to represent the period, but right, it actually carries over, which you, I'm sure, all do when you're writing your story. I mean, the smallest things can take on the most importance and just echo the sentiment of your characters. But I have to see, that's me going off track. I have to pull myself back. We're not talking about craft right now. Okay, so a perfect segue. Thank you, Barbara. Accessories. Accessories in the Regency can't be beat. They are the best accessories. There is a whole language of the fan and how you hold a fan and what you can do with a fan. It can communicate so many things. The tilt of your hat or your bonnet can mean certain things. What you do with your gloves. Many times boots were a reflection of wealth, where your boots were made, the men's boots, how shiny they were, what brand they were. There's a whole language of flowers, women that wear flowers and what flowers mean. And a walking stick, or the guy that carries the knife inside his walking stick. So many different little nuances of Regency that I love to play with. And just like nobody wants to read pages and pages of description of a gown, little dropped hints here and there, you know, the kind of buttons that are on her pelisse, or the kind of ribbon that she's using, just subtle things can give an indication of the status of her inner turmoil. You can use different things like that as an aid through the story. So I feel like in Regency, there's a lot to play with. There's a lot to play with when I'm writing, even just when I'm dressing my characters. Of course, there's the horses and the carriages. That's another thing on my list that I think I love about the Regency. Back before this whole health crisis, Central Park and the horses there, even when I just would see the mounted police, I just think horses are just such majestic creatures. I remember taking the little ride through Central Park in the carriage, and any little novelty like that is a novelty for us, but it was a way of life for them. And I think that's another thing that separates Regency and makes it so alluring and enduring, because we can't go back to that time unless we read. Sure, we can visit, you know, a recreation, a one-time opportunity, but we really can't go back to that time unless we read. So it's kind of time travel when we go through with a Regency. Aristocracy, I think Maria mentioned that. The allure of wealth, of dukes, of the command and the power that these men had, the earls, you know, all of them, the viscounts, all that whole peerage hierarchy, and the interplay within it and the power that it gave them. And this wasn't on my list, but I'm just thinking of it now because that's the way I roll. Like the whole thing about jockeying to marry one of the peers and to elevate your family and to have status and reputation. So reputation was so very important. I mean, I think it's something that's kind of lost in modern times now, but reputation was so important back then, and who you married, or the relationships that you had and the friends that you had meant so much more, I think, than today. Am I talking too much? No? I'm okay? Okay. Language. The expressions and the language of Regency, I think, are distinctive to the time period. Things like getting foxed or getting drunk, your brain box, being in one's cups. A woman was a diamond of the first water if she was beautiful. Things were beyond the pale if they were inconceivable. I think in a lot of ways the language is fun to play with, and it's fun to learn, and it's fun to use. If you use it, it's always a conversation starter if you use it now in modern day. Okay, let's see what I got left here. Time-honored values. As a kindergarten teacher, I still teach values. We have traits of character. I feel like the whole world, a lot of people in the world need these. Loyalty, honor, love, virtue, honesty. They were very important during the Regency. Characters were judged by how well they held themselves and kept themselves in high esteem. Courtships, the rules of courting a woman. This goes back a little bit to the slow burn. The ritual of courting was, it was serious, and you couldn't dance twice with a person. You couldn't stay more than 20 minutes when you called on a person. All of these things might seem like restraints, but if you're developing a slow relationship, they actually come into play quite nicely, because that attraction is there, but then it's cut short. She can't dance with him all night. She can't spend all afternoon with him. So there are different ways of manipulating that relationship that can actually play into developing the physical relationship as well. And the last thing I had, oh yes.
Question, so when you have the short time periods together, can't you use that to create a certain tension between the characters, that they're interrupted when they want to spend more time together, and that creates an unspoken tension for the reader?
Yeah, and it's so good. I mean, I love when I'm holding the book and I'm like, oh, just kiss her, and then somebody walks in and they can't. I love that. I mean, I might in the moment want to shake the book, but I actually love it, because it's just first of all, it's making me turn the pages and keep going, because now I want to get to that kiss where they're together again. But yes, that tension is just magic when you create that, when you think they're finally going to kiss. Or do you think when he's going to say something and he's just about to say the words and then he gets interrupted? So absolutely, yes. Believe it or not, the last thing I have on my list is corsets.
Oh.
And
awesome.
So corsets and the Regency. And I will say I have read many, many books where there's a lot of liberties taken here. I mean, a real corset would not come apart with just, oh goodness, the corset came off. Like so many bedroom scenes. But we're reading a romance, and we definitely want to get to that part of the book. It wouldn't be too romantic if you had to call people in to unstring you and the rest of that. But corsets definitely, I once did a whole seminar on corsets. Corsets definitely are important to the Regency, and not just because they make the woman look more attractive in her ball gown. A woman who could afford a corset likely could afford a servant. So when you wear a corset, it restricts your movement. If you drop your fan or your gloves, you can't bend down and get them, because the corset would cut into your body. So women that wore corsets were of wealth and affluence, and usually had servants to do their bidding for them. People that baked bread and worked in some of the lower classes of London, they didn't wear corsets. They also didn't need a servant. So it all kind of is interplayed, and in an interesting way, that if you had a finely made corset, it also spoke of your wealth and your station in life. There's a little corset tidbit.
It's so amazing too. Like, did you see a year or two ago how corsets, or that underwear as outerwear stuff? Like when those fashions came in and people looked like they were wearing a nightgown, but it was clothes,
right.
tops. Madonna, no.
Yes, it's true though. I mean, lace-up tops are even popular now, but they're just lace-up tops. If it was a real constricting corset, I don't think anybody would want to wear them. And if Michael will forgive me, there's a lot of memes out there now that everybody's staying home, and will anyone wear a bra again?
Yes.
So I doubt that corsets would be too popular right now. That's all we had to share with you about Regency and its enduring allure. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I was sent some questions, but if there's anything that you just want to chat about, I'm happy to do that too. I'm a people person.
How did you write and teach and work on your PhD and have your family? Like, how did you do that? Like, I sometimes just feel, I'm like, I can't do that now. I want to do it. I intend to do it, but like, I can't. Not to be, but my parents passed. Oh, okay. I took care of them for 10 years. Now maybe I can do, you just like, sometimes I'm like, I think I can only do one thing at a time, but then I'll never get to what I want to get. I don't know, just thoughts.
No, I love your thoughts, and it's so true, and I totally appreciate that. And for me, as I mentioned in the very beginning, like, I have to be in the right headspace. A lot of my friends were like, oh my gosh, you must love this home teaching now because you can be writing all the time. You just, put up your lessons and now, but my head is not there because of what the country's going through, of course, what we're experiencing, and honestly, the tensions of doing this virtual teaching. I would give my pinky finger to be back in the classroom with my 5-year-olds.
Much harder.
That was not stressful at all. That was my love, So how did I juggle it all? And just to add another layer, Margaret, my son is on the autism spectrum. So he's special needs too. So yes, it's a lot. It's a lot. I find that I'm thinking about my story a lot, but I might not be committing words to the page all the time. So as long as I stay thinking about it, that kind of helps me not have anxiety that I'm not writing, I should be writing. And through the years, there have been times, like as a teacher, my summer is free. So I had more time, a bigger bulk of time to do writing in the summer. But I've always tried to stay connected. And that might mean just reading the last page of my work in progress. Or that might just mean writing 2 sentences or editing 1 paragraph. But it's important for me to stay connected, because when I found that I've moved away from it, for whatever reason, oh gosh, it's Christmas, I have to do wrapping and cards and all this crazy, right? I have to unpack boxes. We have moved from a different house, and you have these different things in life that pull you away from such a creative craft. I have found when that happens, then I have to go back and read my whole manuscript again. And that makes me like frustrated. So I have found through many trials, through going through the years, that I have to stay connected in some way. So Margaret, if you could just stay connected to your writing, even if it's scribbling an idea on the pad or reading a part that you really like that you wrote, that at least keeps my head in the game. But it was hard. It's hard to juggle everything. There have been times where I've like vowed I'm going to write 200 words a day. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. So much kind of is a balance for writers. And if you're like me and you have to be in this happy place where the dishes are done, everybody's fed, I'm not exhausted, and now I can think about this romance, sometimes it's a real struggle. I totally
My son
agree.
wants to be a writer too. He's a smart kid. He goes to college, and he always tells me, Mom, because the kids know about my journey, and I'm always thinking about it and talking. And he says to me, and I wonder if it's a tip you guys could use too. He says, think of one thing a day. He said, Mom, just think of one thing a character's name, somebody's kid's name, somebody. So, I do that a lot. I try to just think of one, even if I can't get to what I would like to get to, I try to just think of one thing. I think that's how I plotted out multiple series in my head, but I don't have too much else stuff. But at least it gave me like a starting point. And like, what would that person's name be? What would that person's middle name be? What would that, and I love that tip. One thing, it can be very tiny, but one thing.
I think that's a great tip, and it definitely keeps you connected. And when it is time to write, it's going to come all out.
It's in there, yeah. And you can do that while you're making dinner or whatever else. But anyway, I'm taking all your time.
If you
No, I'm happy for it. Yes, Katie.
I just have a question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who's,
We
all
were
right.
raising hands.
I'm an invisible person. Never mind.
I just wanted, Annabelle, just to ask about your editing process and like how, do you plot or pants and how, I find myself with novels that I'm revising for the 7th and 8th time and still not getting it right. And so just, how do you do it?
I am a pantser. I have no idea what I'm writing until I sit down in front of what I'm writing. I write on paper and on the computer, especially when I'm blocked. If I write on paper, I do much better. I've written myself into horrible situations that I've had to think about for weeks to get myself out of because I am a pantser and I create these situations and then I have to figure them out. I usually write the first 40,000 words with very little editing, and that's about halfway through. And then when I get to that point, I go back and I read and I fine tune and I pull it in, I layer in a few more things. I really start to tighten up the story. And then from 40,000 to 80,000, that's the hardest part of the journey for me. Because it's, oh, what are they going to do now? Oh, I don't know why I wrote that he was going to visit the butcher, because I don't know what I'm doing with that. But that's how I make it work. And that's just my process. I know everybody's process is different. I have so many friends who tell me they hate the beginning. I embrace the beginning. I love the beginning, creating the characters, their personalities, setting up the situation. It's after that point, when I get to the midpoint, yeah, I know they're going to have sex at some point. There's always that sex scene at the end, but I got to get there. And that's usually the hardest part for me. So to get there, I reread, and that's where my editing starts. I don't edit over and over again. And that's like a rabbit hole that you have to stop doing that if you're doing that to yourself. And honestly, if I went back to 2014 and read To Love a Wicked Scoundrel, I know I'd be like, oh, why did I hate that? Oh my gosh, I would never word it like that now. I think we're all like that, and we'll always be like that. So you have to stop and just move forward. I command you to do that.
I think it's also the adventure of writing is to discover the story. The problem with too much plotting, just from having read a lot of stuff as an editor and agent, is that I can tell that it was so plotted out in the beginning that the author's imagination became constricted by those limitations. And the beautiful thing about writing, both reading it and writing it, is the adventure that there's part of it that's going to happen. It's just going to happen out of the inside of you. And when a reader reads it, they feel that excitement. So you have to be really careful with all of these methods that tell you how to plot every little bit of something, that then it becomes writing to formula. And the best recipes are the ones where you add a little basil when it wasn't supposed to be there. You know what I mean? And I mean, that's just my experience of my selfish experience of wanting to enjoy it more, because I find I'm more motivated if I'm hopping into an adventure. The exception is I always end a writing session knowing where I begin just a little bit of what's going to come next, so that I've got a kicking off point and I'm not going to face this blank screen or page with nothing in my head. And then I have a starting point, and then I just let myself fly. And yeah, am I going to have to go back and take some stuff out? Yes, I am. But I want to become totally absorbed in the writing process and the adventure of these people and the story. And I want it to come out of my gut as opposed to at least as much as out of my head. And that's just, and I've done it both ways. And in fact, it was a Regency author, Jo Beverly, who taught me this lesson, because I could never figure out why she would refuse to give me her manuscript until she had 125 pages. And I found out that was because she was flying. She would call it flying into the mist, not flying into the dark, but into the mist. You can see a little bit. Kurt Vonnegut used to say it was like driving a car at night. You can see as far as your headlights shine. And beyond that, that's what you know. And then you're going to move a little forward and the headlights are going to illuminate a little bit more. And so I tried it. The first time I tried it, I was scared to death. And I had so much more fun with it, as if the story were not just happening from me, it was happening to me. So, but everybody's got to pick their own way.
And I'm sure that came through in your writing, because we've all seen movies or read books where we knew what was going to happen before it happened, right? And nobody's trying to write a really predictable book. That shouldn't be anybody's goal. So I think, Alice, that's so true. I love your idea of the little basil in the recipe. That's really sweet, and it makes sense, and it comes through in the writing.
Right. I feel like it's like I get on a magic carpet. Like every time I sit down to go back to the story, I kind of say to myself, gee, what's going to happen today? And I'm not really sure. I get on the magic carpet and it takes me where it wants to go, where the characters want me to go, where the story wants to go. And I'm kind of just a stenographer, following along behind and scribbling it all down. And I like that because it's not really predictable. And that's what makes it fun for me to be writing and even thinking about stories. Just the other day, I'm thinking about one that I will be doing in a couple weeks, and a new twist came to me, And I love when that happens. It's almost like you sit up and go eureka or whatever in the middle of wherever you are and people think you're crazy. But, oh, wow, there's this, you know, you think it's going to be X and it's really Y, and this is what happens. And then what happens if that happens? And then I don't know. And I don't know where that's going to go, but I know how I'm going to get to the twist. And once I get to the twist, the story will tell me where it wants to go after that. And that's what keeps me coming back to write. If everything is rote, I'm going to be bored, and I like the fact that I don't know what's going to happen next.
Our characters have lives of their own. I'm just their scribe.
And that's like a real creative process, right? I mean, I love that. I love hearing that. I do marvel at people that plot everything. They have a bazillion different color Post-it notes, because I always feel like, wow, it must be so easy for them to write that story, because they know everything that's going to happen, where I'm in the kitchen saying, well, it's the Regency, it's 1817. They don't have a cell phone. What are they going to do? And I'm struggling with these situations. I once had a couple on a roof and the house was burning, and there was like no way to get them down because they did not have ladders that were big enough to go to the top of this estate. I did get them down. But I do write things like that where I can't get myself out. But I think that's the creative process. I love that you feel that your characters are channeled through you and you're just the scribe, or they're telling you what to do.
Exactly.
That's like a beautiful thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm kind of a pantser, but I've been reading a lot of craft books, and I'm always very concerned because they're beats that you're supposed to hit, or every scene must have like this formula where it needs to exist for a reason. And I was wondering, like, when you go through and write this, how does that work? Do you do that instinctively? Do you hit those beats, or is that something that you don't care about because it's your story? Or like, how do you manage that, or is it important to you?
I have to say that as a pantser, and a big time pantser, I've never read any kind of book that told me when these things should happen or how it should happen. Going through the editing process with a publisher now, if something's off the pacing, they'll call it the pacing. If the pacing is off, they'll let me know, you know, add a scene here or there. But to be honest with you, I think I'm really much more like Barbara and Jean. Like, it's a natural experience what's happening to the characters. And I know my characters, so I know what they would do and wouldn't do. So I don't really have a framework of this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I have to make sure I include a Black moment here, and I have to make sure, like, you want conflict because that's what makes stories interesting. But for me and the way that I write, I don't really have any preconceived notions. And I really feel like the best way to learn pacing is just by writing, because there's always guidelines, of course, but what's in that writing book or the manual or the seminar that you take, it might work for some, but it's not going to work for all. So I wouldn't adhere too strongly to any kind of framework, but that's just me. Does anybody else have a feeling about that?
Yes, actually, yeah, I had something from my publisher, gave me this, and she said, every scene has to be a minimum of 750 words, and every chapter has to be a minimum of 10 pages. And I found that was really good for me, because having come from writing nonfiction, where you have less description, where you get to the point, I would be able to do a 750 word scene in about 200 words. And then I go, okay, now this has to be 750 words. And it forced me to think deeper about my characters. It forced me to think deeper about their actions. It gave me pacing. It gave me a framework with which to work. It didn't say what I had to have in those 250 words, but then I had to go back and figure out how was I going to say this in such a way that it would flow through 750 words instead of 250 words. And the same with the 10-page chapter also gives me the same kind of flow automatically without my having to think about it. But if you have like a lot of 300-word scenes, it's very choppy. And now I find that most of my scenes are way over 750 words, and that's fine too, because as long as it's flowing and it makes sense. But having that guideline has really helped me, and I think it has given me the kind of pacing that my books really need. I write like movies, like in 3 acts, and
Yeah, you do. Your writing is very visual, Jane, and it's very happening right in front of you. I've read quite a bit of your writing, as you know, and that works. But when you're just talking, and that's great, the 10-page, I agree with the 10-page chapter shouldn't go on, on. That's different from the formulaic thing that I think some people talk about, where this beats thing. Okay, beats, good music, and more and less truly useful in writing. I think that we turn to, and I wrote one of them, so I apologize, a how-to book. It's because we're stuck somewhere in the story that we're trying to write, or we're stuck somewhere in our lives as a writer and our ability to keep moving forward. And we're kind of avoiding the actual storytelling. Don't sweat the small stuff. The only thing that isn't small in writing is your characters. Know your characters, learn your characters more and more and more, and then let them and know sort of how the thing's going to end, and head that way with these people. And don't worry about beats and all the rest of it. And trust, you have a writerly intelligence, you have a writerly instinct, whether you know it or not, or you wouldn't be doing this. You'd be out doing something that's easier and makes more money. And,
so true.
I think I'm sorry, Alice. I didn't mean to.
Go ahead. That's all I have to say.
I kind of get what you're saying. I think there's like structure you have to follow, just like there's a recipe for a cake. You have to bake it. You have to mix everything, put it in the pan. And that's fine. The 10-page chapter can help. The switch of point of view, there's rules about that. But the actual ingredients that go into that cake, or the actual words that you put in each chapter, comes from you. And it's just like Alice said, the instinct of you as a writer and the conflict that you want to put into that. I mean, somebody could follow all the rules and the book could be terrible because they're just not channeling, those, creatively challenging and creatively drawing a picture for the reader. So I think just be wary of, following the rules too much. The most interesting people break the rules, you know that.
It's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I'm always like, does the scene make sense? Because it doesn't fit the structure. So it is very encouraging to hear that from both of you.
Did anybody have anything else?
Okay, Annabelle, I once read that when it comes to earls, their first son, he inherits everything. The second son, I guess, is supposed to go military. Third son,
or clergy. He could go clergy.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, the clergy. I'm a clergy woman, so woo!
Yes, that's what I actually wanted to know. Where can I find these rules about the hierarchies and their responsibilities? Because I've tried to look online and I could not find it.
Oh, really? I can definitely get in touch with you, Ursula, and give you some of the websites that I use about peerage. And if you specifically want English peerage, I have lots of resources like that. It is out there. I don't buy too many books anymore. In the beginning, I used to, but I would be extracting 1 or 2 facts, and then I had this big, giant, expensive book hanging around the house forever. So I do a lot of my research on the internet now. I mean, even through the New York Public Library and stuff, I mean, there's so much great resources there. So I would be happy to connect you with something like that about the peerage.
Okay, thank you.
Rules, and you will get strung up, and you'll get in a lot of trouble and taken out in the back and dunked in the pool if you do not follow the rules. And I have been caught in things like that before, where I'm like, oh, I did it wrong.
Okay, thank you. And also talking about the New York City Public Library for anyone, some of the online resources that you were only able to use in the library, they have made those available, like the New York Times, they have made those available for use at home during the pandemic.
That's great. That's great.
There is also the New York Historical Society. When things open up again, the New York Historical Society on 77th and Central Park West allows you to use their library for free. You don't have to be a member to go in and use their library.
That's great.
And if you haven't visited the New York Historical Society, I do recommend it. I love going there.
Me too.
Specifically, there's a book called Burke's Peerage, which B-U-R-K-E'(S) Peerage, which was the basic one I would kind of use to check when I was editing to see if it was way off, and or if it was off at all, because like Annabelle's saying, if you do anything wrong, you're going to hear about it. If you don't think people are reading you, do something wrong. Say something wrong inaccurately, and all of a sudden you'll realize what a devoted audience you've got of people who are reading every little thing. And the Regency's period has a lot of ins and outs to it. So just Burke's Peerage will just tell you what that lineage thing is about, the inheritance, the rules of inheritance in the British aristocracy. And we're dealing with a very succinct period of time here. The Regency didn't last a very long time, and it's because it's related to the fact that there was a regency going on in the royalty at that point. So you don't have to learn the whole scope of British history. This is just a little pocket of it.
Alice is right. Alice, do you know if that book is available just as a resource online so that Ursula wouldn't have to purchase it?
Gee, I hope so, because it's about 1 million miles thick. I had a copy of it years and years ago that I would use, but I think that a lot of that info, if it's not directly, you just look up Burke's Peerage and you'll get whatever it says. Whether they've authorized it to be online or not, like so many of us, were places we didn't authorize.
Send us the link.
I put it on the,
put it on.
the chat. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
I
there.
see. Put it up there.
Thanks, Rashma.
No worries. Hope it's useful. I'm definitely going to spend some time on that.
Thank you.
So I had some questions here, but did anybody have anything else? I mean, they were sent to me. Somebody sent them to me. Who sent them to me? Michael sent me some questions, and Michael sent me some questions. But if anybody has any other questions,
men's clothes.
I went to get my book. This is.
Oh.
This is
wow.
I bought this because I'm like crazy a few years ago on eBay for $42 or something like that. And it's old, 1957. But you know what, ladies? It's such a wonderful, I'm a book person, the smell of it and everything. And it's such a wonderful resource. You know what I bought it initially for? Names. I liked unusual names. And, I like, so I would look in these old things from like 1700 or whatever. And it was just fun to think of all these people who lived before and everything. And I keep it on my shelf. It was my Mother's Day gift to myself a few years ago.
What is it?
And I got it on eBay. This is the Debrett's, and they usually have a library copy, in the stacks, but reference rather. But I wanted my own. It made me feel like a writer, and I still go and get names out of it. Like I'm trying to think of my pen name now and stuff, and I think it's a great source for characters, and it made me feel like I was, I don't know, part of this thing. So
and names are so traditional in that time.
Yes.
It's like now, names go through different trends.
Yeah.
And that book is beautiful. And Debrett's was a peerage registry that when you read romance novels, a lot of times they talk about Debrett's. They go home and they look up the Earl in Debrett's.
I initially started, I wanted to write Regency, so so it's peerage, baronage, knightage, and companionage. I don't know if I said those right. But anyway, it's a lot of fun. You might get a used copy sometime somewhere. But it's on my shelf in my little room where I try to work, and it's a nice resource. I don't know.
Yeah, it's nice. I like it.
Red.
So I wanted to know about the men's clothes, because everybody talks about the women's clothes and everything. And, they had day dresses and walking out dresses, and they had a lot of dresses. But so do the men also have like day suits and middle suits and night suits and
shoes? They had court shoes, and they had day shoes, and they had different kinds of boots and different kind. The materials that they were made out of, again, spoke to their place in society. So you had kerseymere, and you had different types of wool and linen and waistcoats, whether or not they were embroidered elaborately or made of the finest silk. And not as many layers as the women, but a lot of layers to men getting dressed too. Things tied with ribbons. There wasn't, a lot of the conveniences that we have now. They called their underwear smalls. So that's another little tidbit there. But breeches, pantaloons, I mean, it depends on exactly where you fall in history. But again, another thing that's very researchable, and you get visuals, because there are so many, they call them fashion plates. There are so many sketches of what people look like in that time. And there's some great fabric resources too. But men were always dressed like seriously, formally dressed. So you didn't just go walk around the park without your jacket, your waistcoat, your shirt, your boots, your tucked in breeches. I mean, there was really no casual wear. For a man to have his cravat taken off and his shirt open to a V, that was a big deal. So there was quite a bit of formality to that too. Although while men did have a valet to help them dress, it was more really for grooming, the shave, the hair, than to actually put all the layers on. A man could put all his layers on, where a woman was stuck. There were things to tie that she couldn't reach. There were too many layers that had to be put on. I hope that was helpful.
yes, that's good.
A lot of emphasis on thighs, though.
What did you say?
A lot of emphasis on thighs, because we're
muscular. That's from riding those horses.
It's a sexy medium, and the truth is that the sexier the Regency, and you got to be careful with it, but the sexier the Regency, the better it sells. But with the men, they did wear pants that showed their thighs. I often wondered what happened to the portly gentlemen. I mean, I'm sure there must have been portly gentlemen, but they're not.
They didn't look as good.
They're what?
Probably
They
laughed
didn't
at.
look as good.
It's true.
Probably laughed at how they looked, I suppose.
I mean, even though they were so covered in all these layers, when you really think about it, some things can be so sexy without revealing too much. I mean, gloves can be sexy. The way the man's cravat is tied can be sexy. Even seeing his jawline against the white starched linen. So if you're into Regency, I feel like you can make boots sexy. You can, make a woman's hair sexy without having to reveal so much. I think sometimes there's a trap where people think that sex or skin is what equals sexy and passion. But again, like I was talking earlier about the slow burn, just the brush of his forearm against her wrist accidentally, if you write it the right way, it can be very sexy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. The Regencies have always had their specific norms, and sometimes you would be reading, I would be reading like I was reading once this story where he wakes up, he's in his house, and he wakes up, and then he had this this dancer over, and so he basically kicks her out of his house. And I'm like, wait a minute, he would not have taken her to his house. He has a specific place, or she has a specific place. So he would not have brought her to his house. So it was just like all wrong, and it jars you. If this is your genre and authors make those little mistakes, it just kills the mood. And that was it.
Somebody said to me also, I think with time, isn't time another one of those things where you can spot an error quickly? Because until like World War II, we didn't keep time to under a quarter hour or something. I'm not sure about watches or something. There's something about time. And when time was not so accurate, like 7:02 at night or something, it was just, within a time. And when authors write that, So that's a common error. We had a wonderful member, Maria, an older lady. I'm sorry, is it Kathleen? Catherine? She gave a talk at that talk that I went to. It was called From Dream to Reality, and I think it was Catherine. The name will come to me. Maybe Alice. Anyway, she said
Roberta
writing.
Gellis. We have
Yes,
Roberta. Yes.
yes. And she said writing with care. And she mentioned the thing about time. She said, you know, they didn't have watches to the minute back in whenever. That wasn't discovered yet and stuff like that. And she said it's very important that we writers write with care. So it sounds like that's what you were catching when you were reading that, because it just jar you.
Well, there's historicals and then there's mistoricals. And the research to me is so important because it's exactly what you said, Maria. It turns me off to the story immediately. It makes me so upset. If I hear a heroine talking about the hero's bangs,
right.
Like, you know, the language has to be right. The history has to be right. What they're doing, the customs, how long they spend with each other, all of that has to click. Like, I work really hard at my research and I want to make it as an authentic experience as it can be. I've read my share of far-fetched situations that never would have happened, like the dancer in his house over his bed or whatever you said, or I once read a historical where I'm not even going to. The hero flooded his ballroom to make a swimming pool. Okay. I'm not even going to start with the fact that the plumbing or the fact that nothing would have been leak-proof. I can't even go there. But, yeah, so true. If you want to be respected as a writer, you have to do your research. You don't want to write a historical instead of a historical. And the same thing, you know, for any other genre. You want to make it as real as possible. So true.
You have to embed yourself in the period like Anabelle actually has, to the point where part of you is living in your mind in that period, and part of you is living now. And you know it so much that it's real to you, and you might even find yourself speaking in that wonderful quirky language that was so true to the Regency. True, real historical writers are sometimes now and a lot of the time then.
That's a nice way to put it.
Anabelle, I just have a quick question. I have an echo.
Is this Anna?
I've been having technical difficulties since the beginning. Hold on. Okay. So the historical gathering on Long Island that was supposed to happen in October, that was being organized by Kimberly Rocha.
What do you mean was supposed to be happening?
No, that's what I know. Is it still happening? Yes?
Yes, it is still happening.
Okay.
As of today, it's still happening. I mean, unfortunately, I can't predict what's going to happen with this health crisis in the future, but as of today, oh yes, it's still on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what is that?
There is a historical retreat in October on Long Island. Anna, you probably could talk better to the area than me, being in New Jersey, but it's a collection of historical romance authors, and you can buy a ticket and come and spend some time. There's all kinds of activities. There's all kinds of seminars. It's for writers, it's for readers, it's for fans. We get to dress up and have a ball. It's a lot like the historical romance retreat that was on the West Coast. Which I could never get to because it's in September, and as a kindergarten teacher, can't leave in September. But now Kimberly Rocha has organized an event for October, and which will be very similar. So I'm very excited about it. Can't wait.
Wow, very nice.
Wow.
I think those are good for contemporary writers also, because it's good to look outside of your own area of expertise every now and then. And the idea that you have to really know, you have to make your milieu come alive. It's also true in the present. But I think that I noticed, because I went to a couple of fantasy conferences where I don't know why they had me there, but they did. And I went to the workshops, and the whole idea of creating in a totally separate world with rules, etc., really intrigued me and enriched my own writing, in that I wanted then to develop a setting where I would do that. And I think that the emphasis on that in the historical field would be a good kind of tutelage for people who write contemporary and are kind of all over the place. I'm just saying.
Is there a link to that or anything?
I could share that on the site if you'd like. On your Facebook site, on your page, if that's all right.
It's just fun. Like I went to this fantasy thing. They had me there, talking about what people have me always talk about, the business. And I didn't want to hang in my room all day. So I went to these workshops and I found it so fascinating because it was so different. It was so different from what I'm accustomed to teaching myself and reading about myself. And it made me have insights that came in from left field that I never would have found otherwise. So think about, going to something that's not in your specific field. And because romance is contemporary or historical, if you're writing historical, I would say the same thing, but especially if you're writing contemporary, look at some other ways of writing, just to give yourself some new ideas.
I can post the link to that event on the Facebook NYC RW page if you'd like, if that's okay.
Thank you.
You know where it's going to be? Where is it located?
Anna, do you know where it's going to be?
What's the name of that? Is that a historic estate? Hold on a second. I'll post the link.
It's too far away for me to know. I can't look at that until it gets closer.
It's not far. It's a very beautiful historic estate.
No, I don't mean distance. I meant the date is too far away for me to get familiar where I'm going in October.
Okay.
Did anybody have a different question or anything that I can help with? I did get some questions sent to me, but if you don't have to look at those, I know we're already past the time. I don't want to take up anybody's time.
I think the thing that's fascinating for a lot of people about the Regency is it's almost like going back and reading a YA with adults in it, because though I guess not YA now, because it's about a time when there wasn't innocence, when there were rules, when you broke those rules at your own peril. And there was also, it was difficult for women who ended up on their own, whether, they lost a parent or they lost whoever was providing their economic sustenance, and they're out on their own in the world because there were so many few alternatives they had to supporting themselves. To go back into something like that and to see these challenges and the constrictions upon what was considered proper behavior and what happened to you if you even went a little off over those parameters, it's almost like a foreign country. It is a foreign country. It's a foreign time and country, and specific, but also sort of endearing and wonderfully delightful. And I think that's part of the attraction of it, because I remember another editor and I used to go out to lunch and try to figure out why the heck everybody was so in love with Regencies, and we took it apart, and that's what we found, because there's something that we don't have anymore, and we're curious about it, and maybe we're a little nostalgic for it ourselves.
And I think it's a little enchanted. I mean, it is the stuff that fairy tales is made out of, if you look at the romance angle of it. I mean, of course, there were hardships and there were terrible things that were happening just like any other time in history. But if you focus on the romance and the aristocracy, and obviously it's a romance novel, so we know we have a happily ever after, I think Alice is so true. Part of the reason it's endured is because it offers us this little capsule in time that we can't return to in any other way than through the story. I think that's so true, Alice.
I do too. I think sometimes life appears to be easier when the rules are so strict like that. You know exactly what you have to do to get along. For most people who may not have a rebellious spirit or that creative a mind, that living that way is easy. It's the people with the rebellious spirit and the creative mind who can feel restricted by the rules, but a lot of people feel very comfortable living that way. You know what to expect, you know how to behave, and there is a certain comfort in that. If you behave the right way, you will do well. And I think that that's comforting to people, and I think that's part of how school works too here. You know, if you behave yourself in school, you'll do okay. The teacher will like you, and your experience will be more pleasant than
I
if
was
you
going to jump in and say that that's the kindergarten classroom, Jean. There you go.
yeah, exactly. It's just life is a lot more pleasant if you follow the rules. And I think that's really a big part of the Regency thing, is reading that about the rules and the people who do follow them and the people who don't. I think it brings a certain comfort to people, knowing what the
Great.
rules are, what we have to do. I mean, that's been helpful on this pandemic, knowing that I have to stay inside. I may not like it, but I know what I have to do. I have to stay inside. I'm going to be any place where there are a couple of people around. I have to wear a mask, and I know what I have to do, and I'm doing it. And it helps to make me feel a little less fearful about getting the disease, because I'm in the high risk group, and that's been a big factor for me. And my apartment is safe. The roof of my building is safe, and I can go to both places and be safe and follow the rules. And it has made dealing with this easier to do that.
Have you written that down, Jean?
What?
Notes about that?
No,
Because
I'm writing a story. I have 100 pages already about.
We're in a time that this isn't coming back, I hope. Well, it may, I don't know. But this is something so unique, and things are going on in our heads and in our lives that we never imagined would happen. Never imagined. Never imagined 6 months ago. And it's causing us to have to rearrange our lives and our thinking in ways that we'll forget later on. You don't think now, you'll think I'll never forget this, but yes, you will. Write down the details of it, because
Right, that's why I'm writing the story. And one of the reasons was because I didn't want it to be forgotten. The intensity of it, the fear, the overwhelming day to day for some people. I don't want that to be forgotten. I want to write that down so that I can remember and other people can remember. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a way out of it. There is, but that is something that is, as you say, Alice, it's just never happened before in the same way. And I am writing it down. And as I feel it, and that's why it's sometimes difficult for me to write this story. I have times when I just get upset and I have to stop.
But it's good to get it outside of yourself too, because nobody really wants to talk about it much.
Right.
We want to avoid it. We don't mind watching it on television, but we want to avoid the actual speaking of the words. But as writers, we have this outlet that other people don't have. We can get it outside of ourselves onto the page, and it will translate into something else later on. And also, the chronicles of this event are important. This is an important time, like people who really wrote about the Depression or any other intense period of time. What they wrote is very valuable. And what we write about this, what we record about our personal experience now is important. And you could translate it into a Regency. There were things about the Regency period that were pretty horrific too.
The thing that struck me, my brother's an oncologist, retired now, and he will talk a lot about trying to find the right combination of treatments to kill cancer. And when I thought about what's happening now, I said to myself that doctors are I mean, they're like superheroes. They're trained to fight disease, to cure it, to defeat it, to find a way to make it go away. And they are in there every day in the hospital facing situations for which they have no cure. They are there watching people, doing what they can to treat them. And some people get well and some people die, and they just can't stop the people who die in huge numbers. And I thought of the stress that that must cause them, because their entire training is all about stopping death, stopping people from losing their lives. And here they are, completely helpless in many, many situations. And that must be a tremendously stressful feeling for them, the frustration of that, living through that. And that's kind of one of the things that inspired me to write this story.
Can't wait to read it.
Thanks.
And if I may say so, God bless us everyone, because we all got to get through this.
Yes, we do.
And if you and people who've stopped writing, start, because it's just spill it on the page, whatever it is, just whatever is going through your head. You know, if you make the mistake of watching some news, every now and then I tried to stop, and every now and then I try to just read things, because reading seems to be a little more objective and not so present. But I've seen some news, and I wish now that I had just sat down and written what was going on in my heart at the time. Specifically write what's going on in your heart, because that's what's going to make your writing come alive later on. But just use the fact that you're acclimated to the page and use it, because it'll help you survive. There are people who are burning out here, and they aren't all in the medical profession. They're talking about what's happening in the mental health community, and how many people are needing mental health assistance who haven't needed it before. I think we have this thing that other people don't have. We can just write it all out.
Right. Right.
And it's good therapy. It really is a good way to process all that emotion.
Yes, I think so.
I have a question. It seems that Jane Austen has a monopoly on the Regency. You know? I mean, when you say Regency, people only talk about Jane Austen. There is, you know, the Jane Austen Society is like really big here. I actually had a chance to go visit Jane Austen's house.
Oh, wow.
But who else? She had to have contemporaries.
Georgette Heyer, who's not her contemporary, but she's just a great author of Regencies.
But is that
Heyer? I'm just talking about the ones that really kind of quintessentially the best.
Yeah, she's a great.
I would have said Georgette Heyer. Alice beat me to it.
Heyer.
Very true. I also think that Jane Austen, it has such a huge appeal that everybody just equates that with Regency.
I agree.
You know, and even when you look to motion movies and films and things, producers and directors and investors only want to take a chance on something that they know is going to make their money back. And that has endured for so long. That's why those movies get made. But there are so many other wonderful stories that probably could bring more recognition and awareness to Regency. It's just the old money game, I think, when it comes to that. I think that Jane Austen, you said she has kind of cornered the market. I think she is the most recognizable. I know just in my own reading way back when I had a lot more time to read a lot of novels, Kathleen Woodward was my girl, man. I mean, her stories, they're just wonderful.
I love her books.
Yes. And then Joanna Lindsay and Lisa Kleypas and Jude Devereaux and some of the authors that, you know, impacted me because I was most impressionable at that time and most open to all the romance that was coming in. I just think that they are just the best. And more current authors, Sherry Thomas. I don't know if you read Sherry Thomas. She's such an emotional writer, such a wonderful, wonderful emotional writer. Like, I'm not a crier in real life. It takes a lot to make me get those kinds of emotions in real life. But oh, her books, they just twist your heart, and they're wonderful. They really are.
You know who
Annabelle.
I haven't heard of in a long time? Laverne Spencer.
She retired.
Because she's not writing
She has,
anymore.
I mean,
She's not
she
writing
made it
anymore.
really, really big, and then she sort of, okay, I'm retiring now. And she literally did. I mean, there was like, after she retired, there was like nothing, and she retired young, I would think.
She made
Yeah,
a
it's
very,
just surprising they didn't
very
put
great
out her
deal of
book.
money. She made
Again,
an incredibly great deal of money.
Yes,
Maria.
she did.
Annabelle, there was one other question that was sent to you. In your bio, it was mentioned that you like to visit England quite a bit. How much do you learn from each visit that lends itself to your Regency writing?
I do love to visit England. I haven't been in the last few years. I think that first of all, I think travel just as a whole is a wonderful teacher. I think traveling teaches you things where you don't even know that you're learning them just because you're experiencing the travel. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about this now when we're all kind of locked down. But it isn't just even the history of the country and the wonderful places that I can visit, that I really can visit Hyde Park, and I really can visit these places that I write about. It's absorbing the culture. It's getting a feel for it, even something as simple as the weather. So I've been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit through Europe. And I think that you take away things in your experience interacting with the people, tasting the food, learning the customs. It isn't so much just visiting the historic sites of having to go to different places that appear in my book, although that's, of course, that's a delightful thing. I think it's all around just plunging yourself into the culture and experiencing it. Just like I'm guessing people feel when they come to America for the first time. But I love to travel. I mean, I think that you learn things and you absorb things and you experience things that you don't even realize, and they come back to you.
The first thing I did when this pandemic started was I was like, oh my God, the 5 of us are going to be in the house together all day, every day. Love you.
But you're in the closet.
Oh yeah, do you see it? I'm kicked out of the pretty room. Did you see that? I gave it to my college kid. But anyway, so the first thing I did is like, Margaret, how are you gonna, I mean, it's a huge adjustment. So you know what I did? I treated myself. I have this Prime thing on Amazon. And if you have that, you can get a subscription to Acorn and BritBox. And I just felt like with the news about the terrible news about the virus, which was really awful, it's just beginning to show a little light, but even that light is very dim. But I just felt it took me away, way somewhere else. And it's contemporary, so it doesn't. But the late Vera, I was watching this detective show, and there are 10 seasons with 4.
I love Vera.
40.
Yeah,
So
I love
like,
Vera
there's
too.
no way
Big
I'll
Vera
finish
fan.
this before this thing is over. No way. Meanwhile, way finished. But anyway, forget it. I watched 2 a day. But my point is, and it's to your point, Annabelle, the characters were talking, and she was mad that her partner had taken the sandwich. Well, why did you take the cheese and pickle? And it was Lent, and it was Friday, and I was like, what the heck is a cheese and pickle sandwich? But it made me think about something new, and I ordered pickles, from the supermarket, and then I made myself a cheese and pickle sandwich. I mean, it was pretty good, but it was just like removing yourself from this dire straits that we all find ourselves in, cramped in closets in one bedroom, whatever, and taking yourself away. Unfortunately, I think I watched the whole I think there's nothing left to watch. No, I'm kidding. But I do think like removing ourselves from it is very beneficial mentally, to be able to withstand this period.
That's a different world.
To a different world. Like traveling, but traveling in a chair,
Right, armchair.
It's
right now,
only
it's armchair
$6.99 a month.
And the slang, they use words that we don't use. So then I would sit there with my phone and Google it because, that here it's from that remote area or whatever. Anyway, I recommend that if anyone, it was $5. I think. Yeah. And I had to look up like this.
Words.
But I have to use it with subtitles, Jean.
Yes, definitely.
And my husband and I now speak. We talk about nicking things and taking a flit and all this. Yes.
BritBox.
A little bit too.
Fabulous series. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Very well written, very well acted, a wonderful ensemble cast.
Unfortunately, I finished it because this thing took longer than
Take a runner?
Cheese and pickle sandwich.
Right. I remember the cheese and pickle sandwich, by the way.
What
That
is
was
that?
hilarious.
But like the Regency, the love of the Regency, it removes us right now from, to another
Yes.
period. And I think that's the charm and the attraction. And it's wonderful it gives us life and gives our brain respite,
Yeah, it's an escape.
Yes.
Definitely. Oh, my Emma watching.
Yes.
Love Emma, and I love Persuasion. I love Persuasion.
Oh, I love Persuasion too. Oh, Captain Wentworth. I love him.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
I love him. Yes, I do.
But let me tell you, I saw the movie Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Oh, wow.
It's actually really good.
I couldn't do that.
I didn't see it.
It's what you should see it.
It's
You
a
need something
sacrilege. I
different.
can't
Okay?
do that.
You need to see it because.
What's the one with Abraham Lincoln and the vampires? The vampires or something?
Oh,
It was
yes.
But in this
hilarious. It
one,
was
Mr.
hilarious.
Darcy is a zombie hunter, and Lizzie is like really she's very feisty. She's very true. She's very feisty. She's very within the constraints of her role, but it was amazing. I thought it was lots of fun. Very different, lots of fun.
Oh, yes. I can't. It's too.
You have to
I'm
see
a
it. It's
purist. I
hysterical.
can't. My
When
television
you
will
can't go to
explode.
sleep
I
at 2 o'clock in the morning, put it on.
can't do it.
Yep,
Uh,
yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions for Annabelle?
Thank you, Annabelle, for reminding
this has
me
been great.
of the years I spent in the Regency period between Joe and I worked for a publishing company, had a little tiny Regency department, and that wasn't what I primarily did mysteries, but Regencies were my vacation from editing mysteries. And I got really into it because it is so quirky. There's something about it that captures you. And thank you for taking me back there. I kind of lost it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, all of you, for just brightening my day and inviting me so graciously and just being such a lively crowd. And I'm so happy. And please have me again. I would love to talk to all of you again. And hopefully I'll get to meet you face to face sometimes. Not just
That would be
Thank
great.
you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, enjoy the day. Stay safe. Follow all the rules.
Yeah.
And until we meet again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. See y'all next month.
Yeah, next month.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Take care.
We're done.